I would again ask you to pray for all of those that have been harmed by the storm that went through, those that are still being harmed, even in the Northeast. There's been a lot of devastation, deaths, and destruction, and we need to lift up those people. We also need to put some action under our prayers, and that is to help in any way that we can financially, time-wise, prayer-wise. We definitely need to try to help them as they recover from this terrible storm. We've been looking at some of my favorite passages of Scripture, starting in the book of Revelation and working backwards to the book of Genesis. And James is just so rich. We're still in chapter 1. This is the third section that is very special to me because I think all of us can relate to temptation. We're all tempted. We all have those things of the world, the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And certainly, this next section of Scripture is an important doctrinal statement that should mean a lot to all of us. Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive a crown of life, which the Lord has promised to them who love him. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. And then it goes on in chapter 1, verse 13, and says, let no one say when he is tempted, I have been tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. No, God doesn't tempt us. He may allow temptation to come into our lives, but he doesn't tempt us. And it's very important that we never blame God for our temptations. But listen, the Scripture really defines this very clearly. It says, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And when lust has been conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Now listen to the progression of that. First of all, we cannot avoid temptation. Temptations will come. And it says that when we are tempted, we are in trouble because we're carried away by our own lust. And when lust is conceived, what does that mean when lust is conceived? Well, we can't avoid the temptation. And honestly and truly, since we are human with an Adamic nature, we can't avoid the lust itself. But when we allow that lust to take root or be conceived, when we think about the human reproductive system, eggs and sperm will never cause a child unless they're conceived, unless the sperm meets the egg. And so here we see that lust by itself is okay. And not that it's good, but it's not going to lead to sin unless it's conceived, unless you allow it to take root, unless you act on it. And so here's the progression. It says when it's conceived, it gives birth to sin. Once we allow that lust to dwell in us and to continue in us, it can lead to sin. And when that sin, it says, is accomplished, it brings forth death. There are many times in my lives that I can look back and realize that I was tempted. The lust was conceived. The lust brought forth sin. And in every case, it was a very bad ending because it says it brings forth death, and it does. Sin hurts everybody that's involved in it. And lots of times those that are not involved in it. So we need to understand this progression. And when sin is in our lives, it's because we've allowed lust to be conceived. We've allowed it to stay in our lives and to dwell on it. There's a thought process that goes in it. The temptation we can't avoid. What we do with that temptation is up to us. And if our lust for the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life is so strong that it's conceived, it very, very, very often leads to sin, and sin leads to death. Now, not physical death, but death of righteousness. So it says in verse 16, do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing, every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, whom there is no variation or shifting or shadow. What a wonderful promise. Good things come from God. Many have posted today on the internet that what was a Category 4 storm that was headed for the coast of the Carolinas, that diminished down to a 1, man would say that was just the coincidence of weather. And yet, I don't remember a single forecaster until the 11th hour forecasting that a Category 4 storm would go all the way down to a Category 1 before it made landfall. And yet God somehow, through the prayers that were answered, diminished the storm. You say, but Pastor, look at all the deaths and look at all of the destruction. Well, yes, but think about how many deaths and how much more destruction could have been if it had stayed a Category 4, when it went inland, when it hit the coast. So we can be thankful, and we can thank God for taking the Category 4 storm down to a 1. We can be thankful that if we live in the inland portion of South Carolina, that we maybe had to pick up some twigs and branches that fell out of the trees, some leaves that maybe cluttered our driveway. But think how much worse it could have been. So thank God for the storm. Thank God for the fact that it diminished. God bless you and have a great day.